Hey, listen, thanks everybody for coming. And thanks for allowing us this opportunity to perhaps provide some context and some additional information regarding our investigation of the Darius Simmons homicide. I know there have been some questions raised at some press conferences about the conduct of our investigation, why we did certain things. I decided it was important to do two things before I met with the media. First thing, I felt it was important to see that that child got a proper burial and that we did not engage in some sort of back and forth over our conduct of the investigation while that child was awaiting his last ceremonies. Second reason we wanted to wait is I wanted to take time to reach out to the family and have an opportunity to explain to them why it is we conduct homicide investigations a certain way, why we take certain actions, why some actions that we take may seem insensitive, but I would offer they're no more insensitive than what a doctor does in a clinical environment when they have to find out what's wrong with you, and they have to find out now. The third reason I wanted to delay talking to you is that we also wanted to have an opportunity to meet with the Milwaukee community groups that were represented at the press conferences that were arranged by Push Rainbow. From the police department's point of view, we don't need a relationship with National Push Rainbow. They've got a national agenda, and they're going to try to fit local stories into their national agenda. That's what they do. I understand and respect that. But it is important that we maintain positive working relationships with those people in the community from MICA or the NAACP or the Urban League or other such organizations that we have to work with on a daily basis to try to create safe neighborhoods that are sustainable, other opportunities for youth, and a wide variety of other issues that affect both of us. So, as I say, we haven't gone into the media and said, well, this is why we did that and didn't do this and so on. So I'm going to walk you through some things, and I suspect you're going to want to ask some questions. I didn't want to do a formal news conference because that's just got a whole different feel. And some of this is explanatory, and some of this is conversational. And I have some experienced detective commanders here with me that will throw me a lifeline if I start to panic and flail and not know the answer to something. Our detectives would have liked to have been here, but please understand I couldn't make them available to the community people either because they're going to be witnesses, and how they conducted themselves and the questions they asked and the answers they received are all going to be part and grist of the cross-examination someday, and that's how we have to think when we do an investigation. So I'm going to work through a couple of these issues, and you may ask follow-ups about the same thing, but let me try to keep in order. First thing I want to keep in mind is during the critical early moments of a homicide investigation, we have to focus on and remember that our absolute first responsibility is to do justice for the victim. All right? That person can no longer advocate for themselves. This entire narrative now is about doing justice to them, and everybody else's feelings are secondary. We've got to find the truth immediately. And I say this, without any type of irony or sarcasm, but 6 months from now, when our detectives are on the witness stand, nobody is going to care how compassionate they were at the crime scene. They're going to want to know that the statements they got from eyewitnesses are fresh, thorough, complete, and uncontaminated by discussions with anybody else. Now, the uncontaminated part means we can't let witnesses talk to each other. The first thing our detectives are going to do once they take over that scene is separate the witnesses. That frequently means separating loved ones from each other in a moment of trauma and chaos and emotion. All right? When people are grieving or fearful, they want to huddle together, hug each other, console and support each other. We understand that. These detectives have been at hundreds of similar terrible scenes. This is not pleasant work, but it's essential work. We have to separate people at a moment of trauma at a time when they want to be together and talk. And that's what we did here. And the most important person, sadly, to separate was the critical eyewitness to the death of this boy, and that was the boy's mother. I wish it had been the mailman, but it wasn't. It was his mom, who understandably wanted to be with her son. We have one chance at a homicide investigation to get a fresh, uncontaminated, unadulterated statement immediately after the incident, and that is as soon as we get there. And that requires time and it requires isolating that eyewitness from other people. She was interviewed in the front seat of a detective car for over an hour, and I know that may seem like a terribly long time. We've got one chance. Excuse me, ma'am, you said this. Explain that a little bit more. Well, what about? Did you? What happened then? Run that past me again. How did that go again? We've got to get it right. And I know she wanted to go to the hospital, and it's cold comfort to say the doctors would not have allowed her into the operating room. And tragically, once her son had passed, his body became the jurisdiction of the medical examiner's office. She would not have been allowed access to him then because of trace evidence issues and our need to preserve that body for close examination. It's cold to say it, but it's the truth. In the meantime, we had to get that information as thoroughly and accurately as possible. Now, I know there are concerns. Why was the older brother arrested on a mere truancy warrant? And if I only knew what I heard, I would say, my golly, why are the police being so petty? As we explained yesterday to the representatives of the community, one of whom has represented the family, we do that in order to keep witnesses present. In many of our homicides, critical eyewitnesses have various warrants on them. One of the first things we do is find out if they do, and if they do, we hold them on the warrant so we can talk to them. Now you can say, well, why do you need to do that? All right, example. The uncle of the victim also had a warrant on him. He fled the scene before we got there after representing to the other brother, I can't stick around, I got warrants on me. How did we find that out? 2 nights later, he got shot by somebody over some other kind of incident, and we responded to the scene and brought him in and found out this was the guy we were looking for as a witness. It's a sad fact of life. If there are witnesses there and they've got warrants, frequently their first thought is to not be there when the police are there rather than to share the information they know. So we held the older brother. He had 5 warrants on them, 3 of them for truancy, 1 of them for disorderly conduct, 1 of them for obstructing. It doesn't matter. We held him downtown until we completed the interview, and he was released in his own recognizance. We weren't looking to pad arrest statistics at his disadvantage. We needed to hold on to him. We needed to know we could talk to him. This is a common protocol in police work. Now, I know there were concerns raised about why we searched the house, and there are allegations made that the house was somehow trashed. That's totally false. Our investigators are trained enough and experienced enough to know that if they search a house, it's likely somebody's going to sue them. And so we photograph every single room we've searched afterwards. Those photographs exist. They'll be available for examination at trial. They clearly show nobody's house was trashed. Okay, why was it searched? In the course of a homicide investigation, detectives have the responsibility not simply to attempt to draw evidence together against the primary suspect, but, if possible, to verify or refute assertions made by that suspect as to their state of mind and conduct. Assertions were made by that suspect that property of his, specifically rifles and shotguns, would be in the possession of the decedent's house. Would be in the possession of the decedent and possibly in his house. We asked the mom for permission to search for those things. We did. We looked places where long guns could be hidden. We didn't rifle through drawers. We didn't go through purses. We looked in places where those items could be hidden, and we found nothing. All right? Now, I'm not going to say what that means or doesn't mean when the thing comes to trial, but we checked that box because I can assure you, when our officers are on the stand, months from now, a question will be, well, suspect said this. Why didn't you try to find out? Well, we did try to find out, and we did it with the permission of the homeowner. Thirdly, there were questions raised about our releasing property to the family of the suspect, as though there was something suspect about that. Listen, the home of the suspect has firearms in it, or had firearms in it. We cannot leave a locked house unattended, full of firearms, when we know it's already been the subject of burglaries for firearms. We reached out to family members who took custody of the weapons and took custody of the pets. That is certainly a standard procedure and one we have followed in other circumstances. It's important to note that we held all of the witnesses together for some period of time. We did not release them from the scene piecemeal. I'm sure there's a sense that, well, once they were done with me, why couldn't I go? The reason we do not let eyewitnesses go, even when we're done interviewing them, is we cannot allow there to be any representation at trial that we provided an opportunity for the witnesses to collude and get their testimony together. And so until all of this testimony is secured, people are not released from the scene. Again, it's a standard procedure. Now, it should be kept in mind that our homicide division is really one of the crown jewels of this police department. You know, over the last 4 years, its clearance rate has been around 80%, while cities over 500,000 have a homicide clearance rate of something around 57%. All right? They're good at what they do, and they're good at what they do because they're methodical. They're sensitive to the concerns of witnesses and victims, okay? You don't get good statements unless you're sensitive and know how to ask questions, and because they go by the book. And there are times when the book seems harsh. But as I said earlier, we've got one chance to get this right, and one chance only one chance to get fresh, uncontaminated information moments after the crime. And we've got to make sure we do that right. Now, we did send detectives to the home of the family not long after to try to explain some of this stuff. They didn't want to talk to us. I understand the grieving process, but as I said, we did share this information with a representative of the family, as well as what I perceive to be important constituent groups that need to understand that the police department is playing fair with this homicide, took it very seriously, took dramatic action, made an arrest for first-degree homicide on the scene, arrested the suspect immediately, put handcuffs on him, put him in the car, got him from the scene, got medical treatment for the victim as soon as humanly possible. Fire department did great work getting to the scene quickly. I know there's been some talk about charging with a hate crime. I think you just ought to put in parenthetically somewhere, in Wisconsin, hate crime is a sentence enhancer. It's not a separate charge. Okay, you don't charge somebody with a hate crime. It's when it's time comes to sentence that person. If it's seen to be as a hate crime, that can enhance a sentence. So that's not like the police department decided or didn't decide to do something with the charges that were considered. So that's the global explanation about this, and I'll be happy to try to answer follow-up questions you might have on that.
So the meeting was yesterday then with the groups?
Yeah.
How did that go? What was their reaction to the information?
Their reaction was that they were very grateful to be taken into our confidence. They, like most people, didn't know a lot of these aspects of the criminal investigation process. I'd say it was a very positive meeting, and we certainly agreed that some work is needed to be done in terms of the community's understanding of what occurred, because for some members of the community, apparent police insensitivity or disparate treatment plays into an historical narrative that works against police-community relations. So we're going to be looking to work with some of these groups to try to reach out appropriately and contextualize not just the action in this incident, but how these actions play into our general approach to crime control in the community.
Last Friday, when Rainbow Push came to town, I mean, it was like a swoop in. It was the meeting with the mayor, a press release, and a press conference. Do you take issue with them trying to, stir the bees in the hive?
Well, I've been in this business a very long time, and I understand that there are a lot of national agendas at work at any given time. And if something happens in your city that fits into some national group's agenda or narrative, they're going to swoop in and draw attention to it and use it for their purposes. It is at those times you've got to take extra steps to preserve your local working relationships, because the elephants are going to leave the room eventually. And we don't want the mice to get squished, while they're here stomping around. They're going to go on to the next incident in some other city, and we're going to be left still having to work with each other. That's why it was important to clear our understandings with these groups. But I will say one other thing, and this is very important, and I said this with the community groups yesterday, and they agreed. I'm not going to speak for them, but this is the honest conversation we were having. As horrific as this case is, the fact of the matter is that if we're going to bring national attention to deadly violence in Milwaukee, let's talk about where it is. Let's talk about the fact that the number one cause of death of young African-American men is murder at the hands of other young African-American men. It's true in Milwaukee. It's true in Chicago. It's true in Philadelphia. It's true in Washington, D.C. It's true in every urban center of this country. It's a national disgrace, and we're on our own. Nobody's helping us outside our borders. Now, that's the real issue. I get that this story plays into some other narratives, but the real narrative is we have got an epidemic of deadly violence in the youthful African American male community, about which something must be done beyond effective police tactics. Now, we think we're doing a good job in this city trying to stop the bleeding, but the community members recognize that more work needs to be done. The community members recognize that we need some external help. And if national organizations are going to throw their weight around, I wish they would throw their weight around what the real issues are. Okay, and that's the persistent existence of unacceptably high homicide rates in the central cities of America, tightly focused in geographic areas among an identifiable group of young people, all right, who've got access to deadly weapons. That's the issue, and folks don't want to talk about it because it's hard, but that's the issue.
Chief, the victim's aunt, a few days after the shooting at a news conference, she was complaining about the mom being in the police car for a couple of hours, and her quote was something to the effect of, "She's never going to forget. She saw her son gunned down. She's never going to forget that for the rest of her life." I understand you're saying there's one chance to get it right, but couldn't she have still gone to the hospital and all the rest of that stuff and still remembered everything as vividly 2 hours later?
Quite honestly, no. And if you ever interview anybody with PTSD, whether a combat PTSD or a stressful circumstance PTSD, they remember the emotion of the moment. They remember snapshots of it. They remember how they feel. It affects them for the rest of their life. But they don't have a photographic memory. And our challenge is to find out right now what she saw. Get it now, all right? Because the emotion and the grief is only going to get worse, all right? I said before, 6 months from now, when those detectives are getting grilled about the accuracy of their statement, nobody in that community is going to want to know what our compassion level was. They're going to want to know why we didn't convict that guy. And if we don't convict that guy, somebody's going to say, well, they didn't try hard enough. They didn't go by the book. So we're literally going to be damned if we do and damned if we don't. We've got to be willing to take our compassion hits on the scene if we're going to do justice to the victim.